at you all. There you are. How are you today? It is wonderful to see you all. It's good to be here with you. I'm going to move up and get a little bit closer because I need that. Welcome. We are in our, third week of our Judges series. Glenn kicked us off and he started it with talking about Samson. Ryan continued it last week talking about Gideon. I'm going to continue it now here in our third week, and we are going to revisit Gideon, but that's going to be in a moment. Now, here's what I wanted to talk about with you to start off with. When I was a kid, probably middle school, high school, grade school, all during that time, when I lived at home with my parents, we had this amazing thing in our house. We actually had this really, really amazing garden that we grew. And it wasn't like a look how pretty that garden is. It was a garden with purpose and utility that had meaning to it. It was a garden where we grew tons of fruits and vegetables. Anybody garden here now or in the past? I see a couple hands. All right, very good. I loved it. And so we had this garden, and it was this garden, it grew all, like I said, it grew all sorts. We grew, let me think back. We grew tomatoes, we grew strawberries, we grew, what do I have in my notes here? Peppers, we grew corn. We had those big, like, corn stalks. There were just giant stalks of corn in my backyard. It was amazing. We had the corn, we had the zucchinis, we had yellow squash, we had carrots, we had all these different things. But there was one thing in that garden that mattered more to me than anything else. There was one thing in that garden that I cared about more than anything else. And it was the thing that got all my attention, got all my focus, that I really ignored everything else except for this one thing. And it is the watermelon. The watermelon is really the only reason to have a garden, really. The other things are just to make it look pretty and take up space. For me, the watermelon plant, that was the thing. And what I had a goal, a purpose, an intention, a feeling of this is what this garden here is going to be about. And it is going to be, we are going to grow the world's biggest watermelon. We're not going to stop at second place. We're not going to stop. We are going to grow a giant watermelon. And so I didn't care. None of the other things I paid attention to. I ate them when my parents picked them. They were fine. But I would daily go out and I would measure that thing and I would weigh it and I would eye it up and do whatever else all those other things are. And I would sit there, level, make sure it's all level. And I would sit there and I'd look and we are going to have the giantest, most biggest, hugest watermelon known to me. I've seen James and the Giant Peach. I know what happens when you get these giant pieces of fruit. And so we're going to have this. And I waited and they'd be like, should we pick it now? No, we're not picking it yet. Should we pick it now? No, we're not picking it yet. Let's see how big this thing can get. And finally, after a long, long time, you could tell, okay, it had reached maximum capacity in there. If it got any larger, it was going to explode. So finally, it was time. And I said, okay, we get to pick it. And it was a moment. It was the moment of the garden. If the garden had feelings and could talk, it would say, this is the defining moment of my life. It was that. And I remember going out and cutting off, the branches and the stems and all that and taking this giant watermelon back inside. And it was the best thing, the highlight of my life up until that point. It dwarfed everything else. It was the moment. Now, I don't know if you all grew watermelon as children, but I bet you all had a moment like that, right? There was a moment in your life where this is the defining pinnacle moment of my existence at this moment. This is the big moment. And so I go and I harvest it and I cut it and we eat it and it's a good watermelon. It's fine. It tastes delicious. I recall it not being too mealy, like porridge. I hate it when they're like that. The seeds are perfectly spaced and distributed, so there's not too many to choke you each time. Like they're just right there, evenly distributed. And so it became this thing, and it was amazing. But you know what happened? A week went by, and we finished the watermelon, and there was no more watermelon. And I looked, and you know what the rule of growing watermelons is you can only pick them once. And so the question became, well, what am I going to do with the rest of the days? Because this was an amazing, monumental day, but what happens now? And so I bring this up because I think there are times in our lives, I think all of us have moments in our lives where we look at this big, giant moment that happened, this big, really big, significant thing that happened, and we focus on that. We have our own giant watermelon days. We have our own days where we focus, and it's the day where we've picked that watermelon, and that's the big thing. And that becomes the moment in our lives. We have these giant spiritual significant moments, and they become the thing that we depend on to shape and mold and guide our lives. They are the things that give us the meaning in our lives. We spend our time and our energies looking back at that moment and thinking that's the thing, and thinking, now I've got it. Now I'm there. Now I've arrived. Now I understand how it works. This is the meaningful moment. And here's the problem. We often treat these big moments like they're the only things that matter, and they're the only things that really can shape our lives. But the truth of it is, it's actually the small moments, not the watermelon moments, but the small moments that actually make a life. And so that's what I hope we can look at today, because I want you to think about it. Think about those moments that have happened in your life, the moments that you've looked forward to, or the moments where, how about when you said, if I can just meet that right person, I meet that one person, and they're going to make it so that I feel whole and complete, and we're going to meet it, and we're going to fall in love, and it's going to be perfect. And you meet that person, and you fall in love, but is it perfect? It's wonderful, and it's beautiful, but it's not perfect. And you realize this is going to be the moment that everything hinges on, but then, there's the day after you fall in love, and the month, and the year, and then 10 years, and there's all the days that follow. And what makes a relationship is the days that follow, not just the day you fell in love, not just the watermelon day. Or we sit there and we say, if I can just have this one insight, God gives me this one insight in what I'm supposed to do. He just answers this one prayer, makes this one big thing happen, then I'm good, and I'll get it, and I'll know it, and I'll be set for the rest of my life. And then if we're lucky enough, that thing happens, and then what happens? The next day comes. And what are we going to do with our next day? What are the small moments that are actually going to shape the life and not just be the watermelon day? Or when you get that job, if I just get that job, if I just get that degree, just so on and so on and so on. If this one thing, it will make it worth it. It will give meaning, and then the thing shows up, and what happens next? You see, a full life is not a life that's built on the big moments, but it's a life that is cultivated through the smaller moments. And so the thing that I want to challenge us with today is to step into and cultivate those smaller moments. What do those moments after the big moment look like? We're not going to make our life just the day the watermelon was picked, but I want to challenge us to step into what do the days afterwards look like? Because you had that moment, you had that big moment, but now we get to turn it into something. We get to let it be a part of something. We get to let it be a moment of reflection, a moment of celebration. We get to let it be something that helps inform and launch all the small moments that are left to come, but that is not the moment that shapes our lives. Because while big moments can be a gift in our lives, the small moments are what really make it a big life. Big moments can be a gift in our life, but the small moments are what really make a big life. And so what I hope we come to see today is that by cultivating some practices, maybe discovering some ways of being from Gideon's life in these small moments, that you have a garden that grows year round that you can invest in and enjoy. That it's not just one big watermelon moment, but there are other moments that you get to enjoy. And it's the smaller moments between all of those that are beautiful. And you end up discovering a life that has true meaning and a life of deep faith and a life that matters. And so, like I said, we're going to keep going with Gideon's story and see where we end up here at the end of his story today. So last week, like I said, Ryan talked about Gideon, and we're going to look at Gideon's story. The reason we wanted to continue is because Gideon is about to have his big moment. He's about to have his watermelon moment in the story. Leading up to Ryan, just a quick recap. Remember, Ryan talked to us about how the Midianites, this group of people, were just coming in and they were taking everything from the Israelites. The Israelites would plant their food, get their flocks out there, and then once everything was ready to be harvested, the Midianites would come in and they take it all over. They take all their crops, they take all their animals, and they just devastate the land to the point where the Israelites said, we don't want to deal with this anymore. We're going to live in caves. We don't know what to do about this. We're going to live in caves. And then God shows up to this guy named Gideon. He says, Gideon, I'm going to partner with you. I'm going to use you. I'm going to be with you, and I'm going to deliver the Midianites into your hands. And remember, Gideon, he has a hard time believing this. And so the whole of chapter 6 is Gideon just saying, but really, God, maybe you could do one more thing to show me and prove to me that this is true. And so he goes through this process and goes through this process. And finally, we reach the end of chapter 6, and Gideon is ready. He's reached a point where he said, okay, I believe that you're going to do this. We can do this. Let's go. Saddle up. And so that's where we start. We're going to pick up the story in chapter 7. And now Gideon has said, I'm ready to step into this. And so here's what he does. Chapter 7, verse 1. Then Jerubbaal, which is just another name for Gideon, that is Gideon, and all the people who were with him rose early and encamped beside the spring of Harod. And the camp of Midian was north of them by the hill of Morah in the valley. And so they're ready. And so they're looking out over the camp of the Midianites, this big army that's assembled below them. And here's Gideon and his people, and they're looking out over that, and they've gotten up early. And then the Lord said to Gideon, he said, Gideon, the people with you are too many for me to give the Midianites into their hand, lest Israel boast over me, saying, my own hand has saved me. And so God says, all right, I got you all ready. I told you I was going to be with you. You've got your guys. By the way, Gideon, it's too many guys. We got to change this. And so he says, now therefore proclaim in the ears of the people, saying, whoever is fearful and trembling, let him return home and hurry away from Mount Gilead. Then 22,000 of the people returned, and 10,000 remained. So I want to put this into context because I want you to see what God is doing. God is really saying, watch what I'm going to do here, Gideon. And Gideon, I think, is constantly like, but we're good, right? Because here's what the thing is. We find out later. The Midianites have an army of 135,000 people. So I want you to imagine you're standing on a cliff, you're standing on a hill, and you're looking down, and there's an army of 135,000 people there with you. Now, if we do some basic math here, we learn that Gideon has an army of 32,000 people. That's a big difference. In fact, so Gideon, I imagine, okay, God has called him, and Gideon stepped up and he said, all right, give me who you got. And he's got 32,000 people. And Gideon does the math real quickly in his head, and he's like, all right, that's like a 4-to-1 ratio, 4 Midianites to one of us. That's challenging, but we got God with us, and we could probably do it. I got some good fighters here. Let's go. God said he was with us. And then God says, by the way, no, we need less. And so I'm sure Gideon's like, but wait, God, are you sure about that? Like, I think this would be impressive. And God says, no, I'm going to do something extraordinary. So we're going to keep paring it down. So then you get 10,000, which then turns it into a 13-to-1 ratio of Midianites to Israelites. And in that moment, I'm sure Gideon is saying, well, I mean, you said you would be with me. So, okay, but man, that's a lot. I could maybe take 6, but 13, that's going to be rough. But okay, God, you said you'd be with me. So let's do this. And then God, he looks at that and he says, you know what? 10,000 is still too much, Gideon. He says, here's what I want you to do. I want you to take all your guys, and I want you to go down to that lake over there, and I want you to tell them all to take a drink. And here's what's going to happen. If they scoop up the water out of the lake into their hands and drink the water from their hands, they get to stay. If they get on their knees and kind of just face plant into the water and start slurping it up, they're going to have to go home. They get to go home. And Gideon's like, oh, okay. Let's go do this. And so this thing plays out. And do you know how many people are left? 300. God takes it from 22,000 to 10,000 to 300. Would you like to know what the ratio is for that? It's 450 soldiers to 1. And so here is Gideon saying, I mean, I stepped into this, God, and I trust you, but do you think maybe we could do a little bit more? That's a lot. And God says, no, I want you to understand, I'm going to do something really, really big. You have not seen the size of the watermelon that's going to be picked today, Gideon. This is going to be a big day. And so Gideon says, okay. God said, I'm going to do something giant, astronomical. And Gideon says, all right. And so Gideon becomes reassured. And then there's this moment, and this is the big moment, where they prepare for the battle. And Gideon gets his 300 soldiers, and he says, guys, I got a plan here. Here's what the plan involves. It involves a torch, it involves a pottery jar, and it involves a ram's horn. Everybody grab one. We're going to go take on those 135,000 with a torch, a ram's horn, and a pottery jar. And he said, and here's what the 300 of us are going to do. 100 are going to stick with me. The other guys, you're going to split up into 2 groups. We got 3 groups, and we're going to kind of surround this army as best we can with 300 guys, and we're going to see what God does. And so he takes all those guys, and here's how it plays out. Judges chapter 7, verse 19. So Gideon and the 100 men who were with him came to the outskirts of the camp at the beginning of the middle of the watch. So they're essentially in the middle of the night. He and his 100 guys, the other 2 are encircling and just at the watch. And they blew the trumpets and smashed the jars that were in their hands. Then the three companies blew the trumpets and broke the jars. So his people did it, and then everybody else did it, and then they made sure at the very end to yell, a sword for the Lord and for Gideon. And so the three companies did this, and they held in their left hands the torches, and the right hands the trumpets to blow, and they cried out, a sword for the Lord and for Gideon. So I want you to imagine there's 300 people sitting there in an army of 135,000 well-armed human beings, and they're like, this would not be something if I were standing there being like, this is going to lead us to victory. This is like just bringing attention to us. And yet, here's what God does. Here's the watermelon moment. They yell this, and then it says, every man stood in his place around the camp, and the army, and they're talking about the army inside the camp, ran. When they blew the 300 trumpets, the Lord set every man's sword against his comrade and against all the army. The army, the Midianites, ended up being so terrified, so discombobulated by what was going on, they literally killed each other. They started fighting each other. The Israelites never drew a sword to win this battle. God just said, I want to show you the big moment that's going to happen in this story, and you get to be a witness to it and a part of it, but watch what goes down. And they run and it's coming against the army. And the army fled as far as Bathsheba towards Zerah and as far as the border of Abel Tamala and Tabath and then to Yuma and Hela Bend. And the men of Israel were called, it landed, good. They went all over the place. Here's the thing. They went all over the place. And the men of Israel were called out from Naphtali and from Asher and from Manasseh, and they pursued after Midian. And so the big moment arrives, the moment, the watermelon moment arrives, the battle is happening, and remember, Gideon's men don't even have to draw swords. They just get to stand there and be a part of it. And God works through it in such a way everybody's destroyed. This is a big moment. Would you not agree? This is, to be there and see this. This is definitely a watermelon moment. And if the story had stopped here, the story of Gideon had stopped here, we would have said, this is an amazing story and an amazing life that we just saw here. Imagine each of our stories. Those big things, those big moments that happen in our lives. The big moment, the watermelon moment that God created in your life. You found that person, you got that job, he did that next big thing, he gave you that big insight. You got that degree. And if the story had stopped there, that would have been a really big story and a big moment. But did the story stop there? It didn't, and neither does Gideon's. And we hit these moments and we realize, my life is not just this one big moment. It's all of this other stuff too. It's all these other moments that follow after it. And so what do I do with all of that? And this is the moment that Gideon arrives at. Gideon's right here. This is the big moment. And now what comes next? And I'll tell you, and we'll read back again. In verse 23, it says, and all the men of Israel were called out from Naphtali and from Asher and from Manasseh, and they pursued after Midian. And it's this moment where Gideon's going to ask himself, what do we do next? The watermelon moment has happened. What do I do next? And I think it's fascinating because God does the work here, right? God says, I'm going to do something, and he does it. The route is on. The work is done. And when we see God do big things, one of the best things we can do is sit there and say, what is it that God just did right now? Is there something in my life to internalize, to take in, that I ingrain within myself at the amazingness of what he just did, that I make a part of myself that goes with me everywhere I go? And what Gideon didn't realize in this moment is what we'll see is that the small moments are what make a life. We'll see that he missed that it was the small moments that actually shape and make that life. And so what I want us to look at is I think there are two things that I wish he would have done, I wish he would have realized that would have made a huge difference. And I want to talk about those two things because I think they're two things that we can live in, and they're going to help us live in those small moments that actually make a life and not have our lives be just about that one moment. So here's what I wish Gideon would have done. I wish he would have paused, and I wish he would have celebrated. It says instead of pausing and celebrating, he said, come on, guys, let's go do this. I'm going to take this into my own hands. I wish he would have paused and celebrated. I wish he would have taken those moments to celebrate with his men. All these years, the Midianites have been oppressing them. Can you imagine this moment? The Midianites have been oppressing them, and God has dealt with it and taken care of it, and the Midianites are on the run. They're all the way over in Yuma at this point, and he could have paused and said, can you guys believe this just happened? There's 300 of us and 135. Most of them are dead, and a lot of them are dead, and the rest of them are running. Like, can you pause for a moment? Can you believe this just happened? What type of God is this? This is an amazing God. I wish that he had taken those moments to celebrate and trust and point out, guys, we can actually trust this guy. He says he's going to do something, and he does it. Wouldn't it have been amazing if he had stopped and taken those moments to celebrate, and he had said, what are these next small moments? They're going to be moments where we recognize who God is and what he does. Because I think there were opportunities here, as we'll see how his life shapes out. I think there are opportunities here to go a different direction where he could have stepped into these things and looked for these moments to build off of, that were going to be just as meaningful, that were going to shape and drive his life, that were going to actually be more meaningful than that big moment. But he misses it. And I think that him not stepping into those moments, not discovering those things, they actually left him living in a place where this was really the only thing. And he missed the opportunities to live in those small moments. So in chapter 8, we find Gideon pursuing them. Remember, he goes out and he pursues them and his men. And he's in pursuit of the rest of the Midianite army, which is about 15,000 people now. And he's chasing them all across Israel. And he comes to a town, by the name of Succoth. And he and his men are hungry and tired. And they ask the people for bread. And the people are like, well, no, how do we know that this is going to happen? That, there's still this big army out there. Like, we don't know that the 300 of you are going to make it all through this. So no, we're not going to do that. And all right, he says, fine. And he threatens. He says, when I come back here, I'm going to beat you all with thorns and briars. Then he goes on and he gets to another town and they say the same thing. And he says, no. They say no. And he says, okay, when I come back here, and he literally says, when I come back in peace, I'm going to tear down that tower over there. And what happens here is Gideon has missed the opportunity. Rather than sitting there and pausing and celebrating and say, guys, can we just take a moment to internalize what this God just did? I don't know if we need to go chasing after all 15,000 because God just wrecked most of them there. So I'm not sure if that's our job. I don't think we need to take this into my own hands. Can we just learn and then celebrate who this God is? And so he has that moment and he says, I'm going to do this to you all. To his own people. And again, I said it before, this is Gideon saying, I'm going to take these matters into my own hands and I'm not going to worry about the lesson to be learned. I'm going to further this, try and live in this big moment. And the big moment and lesson was that God has this. Not that you need to go chasing off and take it into your own hands and become vengeful and violent. God has this and he can be trusted, and Gideon misses that. I bet there's been moments. I bet as we read about Gideon, we probably haven't had to chase after an army of 15,000, but I bet there have been moments in our lives where God did something big and we missed it. And we started chasing after something. Started chasing after that same thing, and it's God's already done it. The moment's happened. But what if? What if our big moments, our moments where we can pause and learn to celebrate and internalize the lessons of what God is teaching us in the midst of those? And that's what I think this first thing that I wish Gideon had done is not make this. This is a big moment, but this isn't the thing that shapes and guides you. It's the thing that you come out of and you have all these other moments that shape and give meaning and guidance. And so that's why I think celebration is such a huge thing. Not only for Gideon, if you'd pause and celebrate and internalize it, but I think it's for us, because I think we live in a culture right now that struggles to celebrate. We're a culture that's really good at partying and having a good time, but we are not a culture that celebrate well. And I think if we can learn to celebrate when those giant moments show up, if we can learn to celebrate rather than just keep pushing forward and forgetting that there's moments after that can be built on, it's going to do some amazing things. Because think back to what celebration does. Celebrations, they're moments that point back to God and what he has done. There are times where we forget life is moving at such a speed and such a pace that God does something real quick, and then we see it happen, and then we've got to keep going in life. And we often have to take moments where we need to pause and celebrate and say, oh, but he did that. He came through that way. I can trust that. But it's not just for us. Celebration is a huge thing for the people around us and the community around us. Celebration is an opportunity to point out when somebody has done something brave, when they've done something hard. It's an opportunity to look at what God has done and say, I can trust that going forward. It's an opportunity to see life as a thing of abundance and not scarcity. That I can trust that God is giving and loving and pours it all out, and there's an abundance out there. I don't have to wrestle with this idea that there's not enough. I can celebrate what God is doing, what he's given. Celebration is an opportunity to instill gratitude. If I'm celebrating something, I get to be thankful for it. Have you ever lived around a person who just exudes gratitude and celebrates with gratitude and is thankful? What do they do in your life? Celebration allows us to show others what they do is meaningful and impactful when they don't always see it. I coach at a gym here in town, and one of the cool things now is we have this app that we have to sign all our people in the classes and ourselves in. And on this app, it pops up at the very top, significant days, significant things to celebrate. And you get to poke on it. You get to tap on the phone, and the app pops up, and it says something like, this person has been in this gym for 1 month. Make sure you celebrate that with them, because it's hard to start working out. It's hard to step into a gym, and they didn't think they were going to do it. And it's, can you believe you've been here for 1 month? Can you believe that it started out here? And remember when I asked you, do you think, why are you here? And you're like, I just need to be here, and I don't know if I'm going to make it. And I said, do you remember that moment? And here you are a month later, and you're still here, and you're doing great. It even gives us their birthdays, so that in the middle of the class, we get to say, hey, everybody, it's so-and-so's birthday. Let's celebrate them. Let's cheer them on. And this is a person who now realizes that they have a group of people around them who are for them and with them and want to cheer them in their lives. You get to celebrate and that they're meaningful and they're doing meaningful things. Celebration it helps us see people that they are not what they do, but just simply who they are. We get to celebrate them for who they are. It reminds us, this is an important one, it reminds us that life is relational. And it's an opportunity to express care for the people around us. And here's what I wish Gideon had been able to celebrate. Because celebration doesn't have space for bitterness and anger. If we're stepping into moments of celebration where we're celebrating what somebody has done, what God has done, there's no more space to be angry and mad. There's no more space to say, you either do it my way or you're against me. So what I wonder is Gideon had a moment that he missed. I wonder, what is the moment that you got to experience, the watermelon moment that you got to experience, but you haven't had a chance to celebrate it yet? Because I can't tell Gideon, can't talk to him, but I can talk to us. Are there moments that we can reflect back on and we get to celebrate that we may have missed the first time? What did, in that moment, God teach you? How did he grow you? What was the important thing in that moment that you could take with you, that you could take into your life and ingrain it in you and make it a part of you and not leave it behind, but that it constantly is going with you? Is there something that you can do that with? Maybe we just ended school. Did your kids make it through the year? Yeah. You can celebrate that. And for some of them, it was a struggle. It was a fight, and they did it, and they made it, and they're moving on to the next phase, and you can celebrate. Look how hard you worked. Look what you did. Some of them, they flew through with flying colors, and you can say, look how amazing you did. And some of them, both of them, regardless of where they're at, you can say, you know what? I saw you grow from here to here in this year. I saw you mature and become this person, and I want to just celebrate that for you. What was the last difficult thing that you had to deal with in life? And you didn't know how to get through it, but you did. Well, maybe that's a moment you get to celebrate, because now you know you can make it through it again. Now you know you can make it through that next thing. And so it's taught you, if I don't camp on the big moments, but if I step into the everyday smaller moments, they actually become the things that shape and guide and steer me. And so I want to challenge you, find the things to celebrate. So if I could talk to Gideon, I say, I wish you had paused to celebrate. But that's not the only moment he had. He had other moments. He had another opportunity to step into something. And so Gideon has served his people. We're going to go forward in a story. He has won the battle, yes? He has been there when the battle was won, and he has led them to that moment. He has served his people, and he has been that leader. And so the people come to him, and they say, and this is all the way in Judges chapter 8 now, we're in chapter 8, and they say in verse 22, the men of Israel said to Gideon, rule over us as you and your son and your grandson also. So for you have saved us from the hand of Midian. And Gideon said to them, I will not rule over you, and my son will not rule over you. Only the Lord will rule over you. I think this is an amazing moment. Gideon has this moment he arrives to, and they say, you be the king. And he says, no, I'm not going to do that. God is the king. He has served the people in this big moment in the battle, and he has then said, you know what? I'm not going to be king. God's going to be your king. But here's the thing. There were 1,000 more ways that Gideon had the opportunity to serve his people. It wasn't just being king. He could lead and serve and invest in his people in 1,000 more ways. And just because he said, I don't want to be king, doesn't mean that he can't say, okay, I can serve you and be a part of this community and serve this community to point back to who God is and make this community a beautiful place in other ways. And yet, he does something different. He has that moment, and he has another opportunity to step into that small thing that can help shape and guide and make a big, beautiful life and a big, beautiful community, and he does something different. And so he says, no, I'm not going to do that. And then he says this, and Gideon said to them, verse 24, let me make a request of you. I don't want to be your king, but let me make a request of you. Every one of you, give me the earrings from his spoil. And from his spoil. And they answered, we willingly will give them. And they spread a cloak and every man threw in the earrings of his spoil. And the weight of the golden earrings that he requested was 1,700 shekels of gold. And this is besides the crescent ornaments and the pendants and the purple garments worn by the kings of Midian, and besides the collars that were around the necks of their camels, because camels wear sweet collars. And Gideon made an ephod out of it and put it in his city in Orpha. And all of Israel, and this is what the Bible says, all of Israel whored after it. And it became a snare to Gideon and his family. And so Gideon, he has served the people. He has this giant moment that he can reflect on and not live in. And he says, no, I'm not going to be your king. And then what are the moments that follow? He actually says this, I'd like you to give me a portion of your plunder. Do you know what 1,700 shekels of gold equals? I bet not many, because we don't run in the shekel business anymore. But it is about $3 million of today's money. And that buys a whole lot more in Gideon's time, I bet. He says, give me a portion of your money. And he ends up with $3 million. He amasses a fortune. It doesn't even count all the camel collars that he got too. And those were pretty expensive as well. And he takes some of this fortune and he uses it to create this thing called an ephod. And this ephod, when you read through the scriptures, you hear it used in different ways. But really, for our sake here, the best way to understand it is he takes this ephod and it becomes this thing where it's this almost this golden idol almost. It's this thing that he says, I'm not going to be a part of this. I'm not going to serve you. I'm not going to point back to God. But here, you can look at this thing, and that'll probably remind you of who God is. It will remind you. And it becomes an object of worship. And instead of serving his people, instead of stepping in and saying, how I want to be able to serve you, I want to be able to care for you, I want to be able to guide you, I want to be able to continue to point you in the moments that are difficult, point you back to the God who conquered the Midianites with 300 men, he says, here's this. And it became a snare. Instead of living the lessons of trusting the bigness and the trustworthiness of God, Gideon withdraws and creates something that the people end up putting their trust in instead. And he misses the opportunity to serve, to live in a life of service that can shape his life and the lives of those around him. So what I simply want to look at is how is service? I want to end here with the idea of, just like we did with celebration, what does it mean for service to be something that we live in and a lesson learned that cultivates who we are in a life of faith? I want you to think about the service. It puts us in a place of humility, doesn't it? If I'm setting out to serve, I'm not asking for $3 million worth of spoils. I'm asking, how can I step into your life? Service reminds us that life is relational and not transactional. I'm serving because I want to. I expect nothing back. My life is just us. I'm not expecting any sort of reward in return. Service are always moments where we get to point back to who God is. I serve because I've been served before, and I know what God did in this moment, and he calls us to serve. It's a moment for others to feel known and seen. How many times has somebody stepped in and served you and poured something into your life, and you all of a sudden said, man, I feel seen, I feel known. Service is something that helps us shape our lives with grace and patience, because if we're serving, sometimes it takes a while. Sometimes it's hard. But we're doing it because we love that person. And so I would ask, what are the opportunities in our lives that we, unlike Gideon, can we step into? And we've had our big moment, whatever it is, can we step into and can we apply those lessons and start serving people as God would call us to serve? What would it look like to serve the people in your family? The people who live in the home with you, the people who are your friends, the people who are your closest relationships with. What about the people at your work, your community? But you can start listing those things off. I know if I think about here in my family and my community around me, those start coming to me. And what I'd love to challenge you to do is step into those moments. Make those actual moments throughout your week, those small moments throughout the day, because those are going to be the things that shape and mold and give meaning and purpose to life. So I want to end with this. I grew up here at this church, and as I was growing up, our senior pastor was a man by the name of Roger Barrier. Many of you were here when he was here. Many of you I know have joined us since he's not been here. But I grew up here, and I would watch him up here on the stage, and I'd watch him give sermons, and I would just be, man, that is amazing. And I would sit there and I'd be like, Roger, when I saw him, I cannot describe the pedestal I put Roger up on. I was like, Roger Barrier, there is God, Jesus, Holy Spirit, and then Roger. Roger's like the 13th apostle. And that is out of a ton of respect, I say that. And I was just in awe of him and just like, he is a spiritual giant. And he must just at home have moments where God just comes down and speaks to him all the time. And it's just this amazing thing. And I was like, I don't even know what to do with that. I had thought about being a pastor, and maybe I want to be a pastor. And I was like, I'm not like Roger. And so I end up starting to intern here. And while I'm interning here, I'm going to classes at the U of A, and I'm taking classes with Roger's daughter, Bronwyn. And so we have classes, and we've got big exams throughout the year, and I would go over, and we'd study together. And one night, she said, why don't you come over, and you can study, or this afternoon, you can study over here, because we all lived in this area. And so we studied, and I was getting ready to leave, and it's dinner time. And I'm in Roger's house, by the way. I was like, this man, he let me in his house. This is the inner sanctum, but I'm here. And I get up and I go to leave, and Roger is sitting there, and he's like, hey, it's almost dinner time. You want to stay for dinner? I was like, he eats like the rest of us. And he wants me to eat with him. And I remember being like, oh yeah, sure. And he's got a bunch of soup in the fridge, and so he takes out some soup, and he heats up a bunch of bowls for us, and he puts it on the table. I'm like, Roger just gave me a bowl of soup. I didn't have to get it myself. He served me. And then we get ready to eat, and he takes this bottle of hot sauce out, and he offers it to me, and he says, do you want some hot sauce? And I was like, I don't know what kind of thing. He says, well, here's the thing you got to know about it. It's hot going in, and it's hot coming out. And I'm like, Roger just said a poop joke. And it was pretty funny. The 13th apostle jokes about poop. And my life was turned upside down in these moments, because here was a person who I believed was just the pinnacle of what it meant to love Jesus and follow God. And I believed that he did all these big moments. Every moment was a watermelon moment for him. And what I came to discover was that the watermelon moments were there, but the thing that really shaped who he was were the small moments and the lessons he learned from them. And here was a guy who didn't need to, there was no reason he should have, welcomed an intern into his home, invited him to stay and eat soup and make crazy poop jokes with him. But he did. And he served me, and he engaged with me in a way that imparted his lessons to me. And I could tell they were not lessons, they were truly ingrained things. And so here's why I share that. It's because I bet God's done big things in your life. I bet you have some of these watermelon moments. And I bet that if we could pause and look back at them, you could see the lessons that come out of them. And that these are not the things that shaped your life, but they're the things that let you build those other moments that do. And so I want to encourage you, those small moments, that have shaped you, that have built you, that you've learned. Maybe it's celebration, maybe it's service, whatever those are, that they've shaped you, if you've learned and stepped into them. I want to encourage you to look around and see, are there people in this community in my life that I can share those small moments with? Because my hope for us is that we all be people who experience the big, significant watermelon moments, but even more so, that when we do, we become people who can cultivate and live in the smaller, yet more important moments in between.